Section 82 of Reviews by Oscar Wilde. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reviews by Oscar Wilde, edited by Robert Ross, Section 82. Mr. Brander Matthews' Essays. Pall Mall Gazette, February 27, 1889. If you have to have your book criticized favorably, give yourself a good notice in the preface, is the golden rule laid down for the guidance of authors by Mr. Brander Matthews in an amusing essay on the art of preface writing, and, true to his own theory, he announces his volume as, quote, the most interesting, the most entertaining, and the most instructive book of the decade, unquote. Entertaining it certainly is in parts. The essay on poker, for instance, is very brightly and pleasantly written. Mr. Proctor objected to poker on the somewhat trivial ground that it was a form of lying, and on the more serious ground that it afforded special opportunities for cheating, and indeed he regarded the mere existence of the game outside gambling dens as, quote, one of the most portentous phenomena of American civilization, unquote. Mr. Brander Matthews points out, in answer to these grave charges, that bluffing is merely a suppressio veri, and that it requires a great deal of physical courage on the part of the player. As for the cheating, he claims that poker affords no more opportunities for the exercise of this art than either whist or écarté, though he admits that the proper attitude towards an opponent whose good luck is unduly persistent is that of the German-American who, finding 4 aces in his hand, was naturally about to bet heavily, when a sudden thought struck him, and he inquired, "Who told them cards?" "Jakey Einstein," was the answer. "Jakey Einstein?" he repeated, laying down his hand. "Then I pass out." The history of the game will be found very interesting by all card lovers. Like most of the distinctly national products of America, it seems to have been imported from abroad, and can be traced back to an Italian game in the 15th century. Euchre was probably acclimatized on the Mississippi by the Canadian voyageurs, being a form of the French game of triomphe. It was a Kentucky citizen who, desiring to give his sons a few words of solemn advice for their future guidance in life, had them summoned to his deathbed, and said to them, "Boys, when you go down the river to Orleans, just you beware of a game called euchre, where the jack takes the ace. It's unchristian." After which warning he lay back and died in peace. And, quote, it was euchre which the 2 gentlemen were playing in a boat on the Missouri River when a bystander, shocked by the frequency with which one of the players turned up the jack, took the liberty of warning the other player that the winner was dealing from the bottom, to which the loser, secure in his power of self-protection, answered gruffly, "Well, suppose he is. It's his deal, isn't it?" The chapter on the antiquity of jests, with its suggestion of an international exhibition of jokes, is capital. Such an exhibition, Mr. Matthews remarks, would at least dispel any lingering belief in the old saying that there are only 38 good stories in existence, and that 37 of these cannot be told before ladies. And the retrospective section would certainly be the constant resort of any true folklorist. For most of the good stories of our time are really folklore, myth survivals, echoes of the past. The 2 well-known American proverbs, "We have had a hell of a time," and "Let the other man walk," are both traced back by Mr. Matthews, the first to Walpole's letters, and the other to a story Poggio tells of an inhabitant of Perugia who walked in melancholy because he could not pay his debts. "Was tut," was the advice given to him, "leave anxiety to your creditors." And even Mr. William M. Everett's brilliant repartee, when he was told that Washington once threw $1 across the Natural Bridge in Virginia, "In those days $1 went much farther than it does now," seems to be the direct descendant of a witty remark of Foote's, though we must say that in this case we prefer the child to the father. The essay, on the French spoken by those who do not speak French, is also cleverly written, and indeed, on every subject except literature, Mr. Matthews is well worth reading. On literature and literary subjects he is certainly sadly to seek. The essay on the ethics of plagiarism, with its laborious attempt to rehabilitate Mr. Rider Haggard, and its foolish remarks on Poe's admirable paper, Mr. Longfellow and Other Plagiarists, is extremely dull and commonplace. And in the elaborate comparison that he draws between Mr. Frederick Locker and Mr. Austin Dobson, the author of Pen and Ink, shows that he is quite devoid of any real critical faculty, or of any fine sense of the difference between ordinary society verse and the exquisite work of a perfect artist in poetry. We have no objection to Mr. Matthews likening Mr. Locker to a Mr. du Maurier, and Mr. Dobson to Randolph Caldecott and Mr. Edwin Abbey. Comparisons of this kind, though extremely silly, do not do much harm. In fact, they mean nothing, and are probably not intended to mean anything. Upon the other hand, we really must protest against Mr. Matthews' efforts to confuse the poetry of Piccadilly with the poetry of Parnassus. To tell us, for instance, that Mr. Austin Dobson's verse "has not the condensed clearness nor the incisive vigor of Mr. Locker's" is really too bad, even for transatlantic criticism. Nobody who lays claim to the slightest knowledge of literature and the forms of literature should ever bring the two names into conjunction. Mr. Locker has written some pleasant vers de société, some tuneful trifles in rhyme admirably suited for ladies' albums and for magazines. But to mention Herrick and Suckling and Mr. Austin Dobson in connection with him is absurd. He is not a poet. Mr. Dobson, upon the other hand, has produced work that is absolutely classical in its exquisite beauty of form. Nothing more artistically perfect in its way than the Lines to a Greek Girl has been written in our time. This little poem will be remembered in literature as long as Thyrsis is remembered, and Thyrsis will not be forgotten. Both have that note of distinction which is so rare in these days of violence, exaggeration, and rhetoric. Of course, to suggest, as Mr. Matthews does, that Mr. Dobson's poems belong to the "literature of power" is ridiculous. Power is not their aim, nor is it their effect. They have other qualities, and in their own delicately limited sphere they have no contemporary rivals. They have none even second to them. However, Mr. Matthews is quite undaunted and tries to drag poor Mr. Locker out of Piccadilly, where he was really quite in his element, and to set him on Parnassus where he has no right to be, and where he would not claim to be. He praises his work with the recklessness of an eloquent auctioneer. These very commonplace and slightly vulgar lines on a human skull, "It may have held," to shoot some random shots, "thy brains, Eliza Fry," or Baron Byron's. The wits of Nellie Gwynn or Dr. Watts, two quoted bards, two philanthropic sirens. But this, I trust, is clearly understood. If man or woman, if adored or hated, whoever owned this skull was not so good, nor quite so bad as many may have stated, are considered by him to be "sportive and brightsome," and full of "playful humour," and "two things especially are to be noted in them, individuality and directness of expression." Individuality and directness of expression! We wonder what Mr. Matthews thinks these words mean. Unfortunate Mr. Locker with his uncouth American admirer! How he must blush to read these heavy panegyrics! Indeed, Mr. Matthews himself has at least one fit of remorse for his attempt to class Mr. Locker's work with the work of Mr. Austin Dobson, but like most fits of remorse, it leads to nothing. On the very next page we have the complaint that Mr. Dobson's verse has not "the condensed clearness" and the "incisive vigor" of Mr. Locker's. Mr. Matthews should confine himself to his clever journalistic articles on euchre, poker, bad French, and old jokes. On these subjects he can, to use an expression of his own, "write funny." He "writes funny," too, upon literature, but the fun is not quite so amusing. Pen and Ink, Papers on the Subject of More or Less Importance, by Brander Matthews, Longmans, Green and Company. End of Section 82.